Hey, what's going on everyone? Greg here, and it's October. This is the month that the iPad Air is going to come out. But with this iPad being so similar to the 11-inch iPad Pro and rumors swirling around about a new iPad Pro by the end of this year or by the start of early next year, and even other cheaper options like the 10.2-inch iPad, I think it's harder to decide which iPad you should choose than ever before. Or the other decision of maybe not buying any of the iPads that Apple has available right now and maybe waiting to see what's next. Now, I'm going to try my best to guide you through this decision, but know ultimately that this isn't a review of the new 10.9-inch iPad Air, and I'll be making a few assumptions here or there because we don't have these products in hand yet. But I'm getting lots of comments and lots of questions about this 2020 iPad lineup, and this is my best attempt to answer a lot of your questions on what iPad you should purchase or what you should do. Okay, so the newest iPad here is the iPad Air, so let's start with that one. This is obviously the middle option between the $329 10.2-inch iPad and the $799 11-inch iPad Pro. And I think this might end up being the default iPad option for most people. It carries over most of the features and design aesthetic that you would want with the iPad Pros and packs it into a much more affordable model. Now, this iPad Air says it's 10.9 inches. The display does have slightly, and I mean slightly thicker bezels, and I'm doubting most people will be able to notice the difference in the display size between this and the 11-inch iPad Pro. It also brings over the flat design, support for all of the new iPad Pro accessories like the much improved second generation Apple Pencil with magnetic charging, and it even has a smart connector on the back, so you can use this iPad with Apple's brand new Magic Keyboard, which is expensive, but pretty much universally loved by anyone that's ever used one. It also comes packed with Apple's flagship processor, the A14, which when you're comparing that to the iPad Pros, theoretically, the iPad Pros are kind of behind by 2 chip generations with the A12Z processor. Now, we do have some idea on how the A14 will be in real-world performance. Most are expecting that the single-core performance will outclass what is available on the iPad Pro. Single-core performance is generally more important for everyday tasks like launching apps faster. However, it is very likely that the iPad Pro will continue to enjoy advantages in multi-core performance and definitely in GPU performance. That will help it with those pro tasks like video editing and rendering. And I get that many are kind of confused because the A14 is technically a higher number, but for the sake of dumbing this down, the iPad Air and iPad Pro are both going to be plenty fast, especially for the average user. Now, you might be sitting here and watching this very video and on the order page, and you're thinking that the Air and the Pro look exactly the same, have support for the same accessories, and the Air is even lower cost than the Pro model and has a processor that could be even more advanced in some areas than what is available on the iPad Pro. So you might think your decision is easier than ever. Well, that is not entirely true. There's downsides for going with the Air that might not be apparent to you at first glance, and it does not have all of the Pro features. First of all, the starting storage on the base model for the Air is 64 gigabytes, which may not be enough for users looking to replace their laptop with this model, although bumping it up to 256 gigabytes of storage will still bring you below the price of a 128 gigabyte iPad Pro. This is something you should be made aware of. You also have what I assume will be worse speakers, with Apple's official tech specs only listing 2 stereo speakers rather than the quad arrangement that you would get with the iPad Pro. Yes, there are 4 cutouts for the speakers, but I think that's more of a design aesthetic rather than support for actual quad speakers, kind of like how some of the iPhones have 2 speaker cutouts even though the sound only comes out from one area. And there's also even little details like the USB-C port on the Air. It supports 5 gigabits per second data transfer speeds, and on the iPad Pro, it's actually faster. It's double the speed at 10 gigabits per second. On top of that, Apple's high refresh rate ProMotion 120Hz display does not make its way over to the iPad Air. This is a feature that a lot of people really like, as it makes everything you do on your iPad, like interacting with the display, appear smoother, especially interactions like scrolling. I think most users will be fine with the 60Hz display. That's the same refresh rate that is currently available on the iPhone you might be using, but I will say that professionals that use the Apple Pencil, especially for drawing, will definitely appreciate the lower latency and smoother experience of a 120Hz display. Of course, there's other changes between the Air and the Pro, changes that you might prefer depending on your personal preferences, like the fact that the Pro comes with Face ID, which will let you unlock your iPad Pro just by looking at it. And the Air will come with Touch ID built into the power button. Some users, especially during these times, might actually prefer the Touch ID sensor as opposed to the Face ID sensor as their preferred form of unlocking their device. And while I do prefer Face ID, I'm willing to admit that this is probably just personal preference on the user front. Just be made aware that there are some features tied to Face ID besides unlocking your iPad, so if you wanted to use Apple's Animoji feature, that won't be supported on the iPad Air. Oh, and there's also the camera situation on the iPads, which I honestly doubt most people care about, but I'll mention them. The iPad Pro has two cameras, a wide and ultra-wide angle lens, as well as an advanced LiDAR scanner that makes it better for use with augmented reality applications. The iPad Air receives one single 12-megapixel rear camera, so if you're an iPad photographer, or if you can actually make use of that LiDAR scanner for something like measuring out floor plans for real estate, well, then you might be better suited going for the iPad Pro, and it might be something you want to consider, but it's probably not a decision maker for most people. I'm guessing. I'm not judging you if you're taking photos with your iPad. It's perfectly fine. Okay, so let's answer this question. iPad Air or iPad Pro, specifically the 11-inch model. Should you buy this iPad Air today or go for the Pro option? Well, I think that right now, if you're deciding between this smaller size version of the Pro and the Air, I think the Air here is the better value here, giving you most of the features you would want on the iPad Pro at less money. Now, some users will still benefit going for the Pro model, especially if you are more reliant on multi-core and GPU performance, or if you are a serious artist who plans to use this to replace a drawing tablet, at which point you'd probably want to step up to the bigger 12.9-inch iPad Pro anyway to extend your canvas and have even more room for your tools on the display. However, there's also another hidden factor that you might want to consider if you're in the market for an iPad Pro, and that is to wait. There's countless rumors and leaks swirling around, and while I usually don't advise people to make purchasing decisions based on leaks and rumors, it seems pretty apparent that Apple is looking to upgrade the iPad Pro this year faster than they normally would. Recent reports from supply chain leaker Ming-Chi Kuo say that the iPad Pro could get refreshed by as soon as the end of this year with an A14X processor, which would definitely mean it would beat the iPad Air on all fronts of the CPU level, and perhaps an even bigger upgrade to the display with Apple's first mini LED display for the iPad Pro, which will improve things like the contrast ratio, deeper black levels, better brightness levels, and enable the iPad Pro to properly display HDR content. Kuo also says in this report that Touch ID in the power button may be a feature that comes to future iPad Pro models, and there's growing speculation that Apple may implement a dual strategy of Touch ID and Face ID authentication together, which is something I would prefer, as it would make unlocking your device easier if your face is covered or if your hand is covered in a glove. You could choose which unlocking method works better at the time. So display upgrades and a faster processor will make the Pro stand out a bit more from the current situation we are facing now and create a better ideal lineup for users looking to purchase an iPad. Now, yes, let's be honest, even at $599, the Air is less money than a Pro, but it's still expensive and more money than what the iPad Air used to be. It used to retail for $499. So if you're looking at both of these options and think there's no one for you because it's still too much money, well, you should really consider Apple's fantastic $329 iPad. It runs almost all the features you would want on an iPad, like Apple Pencil support, Smart Connector support for Apple Smart Keyboard, and you can even use the Logitech Combo Touch to attach a trackpad and a keyboard to this iPad to make it more of a viable laptop alternative. I've been using this iPad for the past week as my main iPad, and it honestly feels like a pretty similar experience to using my more expensive iPad Pro, and that has a lot to do with the powerful A12 processor that is packed into this $329 device, and that's faster than the processor found in a $999 MacBook Air. So you can get a really good iPad that delivers most of what you want in a affordable package. That gets you all the same features with iPadOS 14 and saves you quite a bit of money, even on the 128GB model, which will retail for $429. And then there's the iPad mini, which I consider an entirely different product category for users who want a small tablet. Honestly, it's still pretty competent. It comes with the same processor as that 10.2-inch iPad. However, for that one, you may want to wait as well, as there's rumors that Apple might actually refresh that with a full screen design as well. All right, everyone, and that's going to do it for this video. Hopefully it helped you out. If it did, well, make sure you leave me a like. If you want to see more videos from my channel, including a future review of this iPad Air, make sure you're subscribed. If you want to help the channel out in any way, like maybe purchasing this new iPad Air, consider using one of the affiliate links in the description below. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next video. Take care, everyone.